Okay, and send out a notice. All right, and check to make sure we're online. Yes, we are online. Ah, okay. Anyway, let's see what the problem is. Oh, let me turn up the volume. Seems a little problem with the volume. Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Oh. Okay, that solved the problem with the volume. Okay, just a little technical problem which we just solved. Hare Krishna. Okay, so let's chant. Shri Guru Charana Padma Divana Bhakti Sadma Padan Mui Savadana Mate Hara Prasade Bhai Bhavatori Yayane Krishna Prati Hoy Hoy Guru Padma Bhakya Chitati Koriya Karuna Koriya Manaya Shri Guru Charan Merate Isi Uttamagati Yek Prasade Pure Sarva Shri Guru Charan Merate Isi Uttamagati Yek Prasade Thakuram Lilo Ye Janme Janme Prabhu Say Shakuram Tiro Ye Janme Janme Prabhu Say Divegan Rede Brakasita Yanrele Prakasita Prema Bhakti Yogi Avajavanasa Yote Prema Bhakti Yogi Avajavanasa Yote Medikai Agaracharita Medinaya Go, Adibo, 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 Adibo. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parampatacharya. Also Tada Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shitwaita Ganadha Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Sayam Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Ki Jai, Mathuradam Ki Jai, Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, Yamunamaya Ki Jai, Srimati Lasadevi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prestaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamati Namani Namaste, Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pajarni, Nivashesha Shunyavadi, Paschatya Teja Tarane. So we're going to continue with our study of the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta. We're on the 20th chapter of the Antya Lila. We're finishing up the Caitanya Caritamrta, which we will do in the next few days. And we're beginning with text 53. So this last chapter started to deal with the Shikshashtika prayers. It deals primarily with the Shikshashtika prayers, and it's the final chapter in the Caitanya Caritamrta. So let's go ahead and read. Somagana Timiranda Shah Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur Unmiritam Yena Tasmai Shigurve Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances under the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. Actually, I forgot to read the translation to this prayer we just chanted. The lotus feet of my spiritual master is the only way by which one can attain pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Okay, continuing with text 53. Yena Vire Vancha Krishna Tara Rupe Jat Krishna Tarena Panahaya Duki Muitarapaya Pari Lana yana hate dadi, krita karana tanre karon suki. If Krishna, attracted by the beauty of some other woman, wants to enjoy with her but is unhappy because he cannot get her, I fall down at her feet, catch her hand, and bring her to Krishna to engage her for his happiness. So this, of course, is the consciousness of Srimati Radharani. Srimati Radharani's consciousness is that whatever makes Krishna happy, even if it makes me miserable, that's my happiness. And that was a previous verse, one of the previous verses we read. In other words, whatever will satisfy Krishna, that is absolute surrender. Krishna's pleasure. And then everything else comes after that. Kanta Krishna Karirosha. So, obviously, this is like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's commentary on the last verse of the Shikshashtaka. Krishna, you may crush me by your embrace. You may leave me brokenhearted by not being present before me. You're completely free to do anything and everything, and you'll always remain my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Oh, Krishna, you may be a devachi. So these verses are actually like a commentary on that last verse of the Shikshashtaka. So it's all Shikshashtaka. Kanda Krishna Karirosha, Krishna Paya Santosha, Sukapaya Tadana Bhartsane, Yata Yogya Karimana, Krishna Tate Sukapana, Chademana Alpa Sadhane. When a beloved gopi shows symptoms of anger toward Krishna, Krishna is very satisfied. Indeed, he is extremely pleased when chastised by such a gopi. She shows her pride suitably, and Krishna enjoys that attitude. Then she gives up her pride with a little endeavor. So in other words, Radharani's man, or anger, pleases Krishna. And he loves to be chastised by her. And when Krishna enjoys that, then she gives up her pride very easily. Say nare jiye kene, Krishna mamra yapyata jane, tabu Krishna kare gara rosha, nija suke mane kaja, paduka tara shire vra bhaja, Krishna ramatra chahiye santosha. Why does a woman continue to live who knows that Krishna's heart is unhappy but who still shows her deep anger toward him? She is interested in her own happiness. I condemn such a woman to be struck on the head with a thunderbolt, for we simply want the happiness of Krishna. And Prabhupada says, a devotee who is satisfied only with his own sense gratification certainly falls down from the service of Krishna. Being attracted by material happiness, he later joins the Prakrita Sahajas, who are considered to be non-devotees. Prakrita Sahaja means people take things very, very cheaply and they think they understand and are entering into the Radha Krishna conjugal loving affairs, whereas in reality they're simply interested in material things and they're projecting their material understanding onto the spiritual realm. Therefore, they're committing offenses in the name of devotional service. So that's why they're considered to be non-devotees. Wow. Of course, they're better than Mayavadis. Okay. Talk about gradation here. They're better than Mayavadis. Ye gopi mora kare dveshe, Krishnara kare santoshe, Krishna yare kare abhilasha, Muitara garayana, tare sevan dasihana, tabe mora sukera ulasa. If a gopi envious of me satisfies Krishna and Krishna desires her, I shall not hesitate to go to her house and become her maidservant, for then my happiness will be awakened. Wow. Completely selfless service. Kushti vipraro ramane, pativrata shiromane, patilagi kaila vyeshara seva, stambila suryaragati, jiaila mritapati, Tushta-kaila mukya tina deva. The wife of a Brahmana suffering from leprosy manifested herself as the topmost of all chaste women by serving a prostitute to satisfy her own husband. She thus stopped the movement of the sun, brought her dead husband back to life, and satisfied the three principal demigods, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara. So this is, of course, a story from the Aditya Purana, Markandeya Purana, and Padma Purana, tell about a Brahmana who was suffering from leprosy but had a very chaste and faithful wife. He desired to enjoy the company of a prostitute, and therefore his wife went to her and became her maidservant just to draw her attention. We're not suggesting you do this for his service. When the prostitute agreed to associate with him, the wife brought her leprotic husband. When that leper, the sinful son of a Brahmin, saw the chastity of his wife, he finally abandoned his sinful intentions. So when he saw that he actually had a very chaste wife. While coming home, however, he touched the body of Markandeya Rishi, who thus cursed him to die at sunrise. Because of her chastity, the woman was very powerful. Therefore, when she heard about the curse, she vowed to stop the sunrise. Because of her strong determination to serve her husband, the three deities, namely Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara, were very happy, and they gave her the benediction that her husband would be cured and brought back to life. This example is given herein to emphasize that a devotee should engage himself exclusively for the satisfaction of Krishna without personal motives. That will make his life successful. It's not, the example is not given that ladies should do that nowadays. Believe me. Actually, the injunction is that if your husband is fallen, then you don't stay with the husband. Well, or abusive. You know, that's the point. And that was brought up in the story of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's daughter Sati, who had her husband, who was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's son-in-law, Amoga, commit offenses against Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by accusing Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu of eating as much as like 12 or whatever amount of people. And Amoga, he got cholera. But Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya also rejected Amoga as a son-in-law and said that Sati doesn't have a husband anymore, basically, or she's a widow. So that's the point. And that was the story brought out earlier in the Chaitanya Charitamrta. Krishna Mora Jivana, Krishna Mora Pranadana, Krishna Mora Pranera Parana, Vidyayu Paradaran, Sevakari Sukhi Karan, E Mora Sadara Jana. Krishna is my life and soul. Krishna is the treasure of my life. Indeed, Krishna is my very life of my life. I therefore keep him always in my heart and try to please him by rendering service. That is my constant meditation. Mora Sukha Sevane, Krishnera Sukha Sangame, Vataiva Deha Dena Dana, Krishna More Kantakare, Kahi More Praneshwari, Morahaya Dasi Abhimana. My happiness is in the service of Krishna, and Krishna's happiness is in union with me. This is Radharani, of course. For this reason, I give my body in charity to the lotus feet of Krishna, who accepts me as his loved one and calls me his most beloved. It is then that I consider myself his maidservant. Kantaseva Sukapura Sangama Haite Sumadhura Tati Sakshi Lakshmi Takurani Narayana Radi Stiti Tabu Pada Sevaya Mati Sevakari Dasi Abhimani. Service to my lover is the home of happiness and more sweet than direct union with him. The goddess of fortune is evidence of this, for although she constantly lives in the heart of Narayan, she wants to render service to his lotus feet. She therefore considers herself a maidservant and serves him constantly. So that word abhimani, dasi abhimani, abhimana or abhimani, of course abhimani is feminine. Abhimana means the conception of yourself. So our abhimana now, if I happen to be male, is that we are servants of the body and the mind and this material energy. So we have to change that to either dasa abhimana or dasi abhimani. Dasi or dasa means servant. Dasi is feminine. Dasa is masculine. So that's why we all get the name Das or Dasi. For example, my name is Bir Krishna Das Goswami. Das. Everybody gets the name Das. And probably commented once that in Bengal, the appellation Das indicates, it's lower caste or class. And so, but we are simply servants. That's all. Servants of Krishna. Gopi Bhatta, Bharata, Parakamala Dasa Dasa, Dasana Das. E Radhara Vachana, Vishuddha Prema Lakshana, Ashvadaye Sri Gora Raya, Bhave Mana Nagi Stira, Satvike Vyape Sharira, Manadeha Dharana Nahayaya. These statements by Srimati Radharani show the symptoms of pure love for Krishna tasted by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In that ecstatic love, his mind was unsteady. Transformations of transcendental love spread throughout his entire body, and he could not sustain his body and mind. Vrajera Vishuddha Prema, Yena Jambunada Hema, Atma Sukera Yahan Nahi Ganda, Se Prema Janate Loke, Prabhu Kaila Kesh Loke, Pare Kaila Artera Nirvanda. The pure devotional service in Vrindavan is like the golden particles in the river Jambu. In Vrindavan, there is not a trace of personal sense gratification. It is to advertise such pure love in this material world that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has written the previous verse and explained its meaning. The verse referred to here is text 47, the 8th verse of the Shikshashtaka. In other words, Lord Chaitanya is explaining the meaning of the Shikshashtaka through these particular verses of manifesting Radharani's consciousness in relationship to Krishna. And that's really the point, that the more you move up the rasas, or ratis, the relationships, from Shanta, Dasha, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya, the more you move up, the more the intense mood of servitude becomes manifest. That's something that people often forget. The intense mood and servitude becomes perfected in the conjugal ras to the highest degree. It's also perfect in the dasha ras too, but it becomes most perfect. If you could say perfect, more perfect, and most perfect in the conjugal ras, because it's absolute Atma Nivedanam. Emata Mahaprabhu Bhavishtahana Pralapa Kadila Tat Tat Shloka Padiya. Thus overwhelmed by ecstatic love, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spoke like a madman and recited suitable verses. Purve ashta shloka kari loke shikshadila, se ashta shlokera arta pane oshwadila. The Lord had formerly composed these 8 verses to teach people in general. Now he personally tasted the meaning of these verses, which are called the Shikshashtaka. Prabhuda Shikshashtaka Shloka Ye Pare Shune Krishna Prema Bhakti Tara Pare Dine Dine. If anyone recites or hears these 8 verses of instruction by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his ecstatic love and devotion for Krishna increase day by day. Yadyapi hapru koti samudra gambira nanabhava sundrodaya hayena ashdira. Although Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is as deep and grave as millions of oceans, when the moon of his various emotions arises, he becomes restless. Ye ye shloka jayadeva bhagavate ayeranatake ye ara karnamrite se bhave shloka kariya patane se bhava vishe karena ochvodane. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu read the verses of Jayadev's Gita Govinda, of Srimad Bhagavatam, of Ramananda Roy's drama Jagannatha Balbhanataka, and of Bilvamangal Thakur's Krishna Caritamrta, he was overwhelmed by various ecstatic emotions of those verses. Thus he tasted the purports. Dvarasha Vatsara Chedasa Ratri Dine Krishna Rasa Shvadaye Dui Bandhu Sane. For 12 years, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu remained in that state day and night. With his two friends, that's Rupa Damodar Goswami and Ramananda Roy, he tasted the meaning of those verses, which consists of nothing but the transcendental bliss and mellows of Krishna consciousness. Se Sabalila Rasa Apane Ananta Sahasra Vadane Varne Nahi Pananta. Even Anantadev, who has thousands of faces, could not reach the end of describing the transcendental bliss of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. Jivak Shudra Buddhikon Taha Pare Varnite Taraeka Kanasparshi Apana Shodite. How then could an ordinary living being with very little intelligence describe such pastimes? Nevertheless, I am trying to touch but a particle of them just to rectify myself. Yata Chesta Yata Palapa Nahi Paravada Se Sabavanite Granta Haya Suvishtara. There is no limit to Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's activities and his words of madness. Therefore, describing them all would greatly increase the size of this book. Vrindavana Das Pratama Ye Lila Varnina Se Sabalila Rahami Sutramatra Kaila. Whatever pastimes Sri Vrindavan Das Thakur is first described, I have merely summarized. So now we're ending the end of the book. Coming close to the end of the book, sorry. Ending the end of the book. I'm coming close to ending the book. And so you're going to find some summarization here at the end of the whole book. Tanra Vyat Atyakya Avashesha Sangshepe Kahila Lilarabul Ye Granta Tatapi Badila. I've only very briefly described the pastimes of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, not described by Vrindavan Das Thakur. Nevertheless, because those transcendental pastimes are so numerous, the size of this book has increased. In other words, he's saying that he actually describes some of the earlier pastimes which Vrindavan Das Thakur described, but he didn't describe them in as much depth as Vrindavan Das Thakur. But even though he described them, there were so many of them that the book increased in size. Ateva se sabalila napari varni bore samapti karilun lilake kari namaskare. It is impossible to describe all the pastimes elaborately. I shall therefore end this description and offer them my respectful obeisances. Ye kichu kahilun e digdarashana e anusarika habe tara ashvadana. What I have described gives merely an indication, but by following this indication one may obtain a taste of all the pastimes of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Prabhuda Gambhira Lila Napari Bhushite Buddhi Pravesha Nahitate Napari Varnite. I cannot understand the very deep, meaningful pastimes of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. My intelligence cannot penetrate them, and therefore I could not properly describe them. Savashrota Vaishnavera Vandya Chatana Chaitanya Charatra Varnana Koilun Samapana. After offering my respectful obeisances to the lotus feet of all my Vaishnava readers, I shall therefore end this description of the characteristics of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Akasha Ananta Tate Yati Pakshigana Yara Yata Shakti Tata Kare Arohana. The sky is unlimited, but many birds fly higher and higher according to their own abilities. Ache Mahaprabhu Lila Nahi Ora Para Jivahana Keva Samyak Pari Vani Bara. The pastimes of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu are like the unlimited sky. How then can an ordinary living being describe them all? Yavat Budira Gati Tateka Varnilun Sumedrera Madhyegyena Eka Kana Chun Ilun. I have tried to describe them as far as my intelligence allows, as if trying to touch a drop in the midst of a great ocean. Nityananda Kripa Patra Vrindavana Dasa Caitanya Lila Lateno. Hyena Harivyasa. Vrindavan Das Thakur is Lord Nityananda's favorite devotee, and therefore he is the original Vyasadeva in describing the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Prabhupada comments that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that all writers after Vrindavan Das Thakur who are pure devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and who have tried to describe the Lord's activities are to be considered like Vyas. Sri Vrindavan Das Thakur is the original Vyasadeva in describing Chaitanya Lila, and all others who follow in his footsteps by describing Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes are also to be called Vyasadeva. The bona fide spiritual master is called Vyasa, representative Vyasadeva, because he's a representative of Vyas. Worshipping the birthday of such a spiritual master is called Vyasa Puja. Tanrage Vyadyapi Sabalila Ravandara Tatapi Alpa Varniya Chadilena Hara. Although Vrindavan Das Thakur has within his jurisdiction the full store of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, he has left aside most of them and described but a small portion. Ye Kachuvarnilun Seya Sangshepa Kariya Likitena Parena Tabu Rakiyachena Likya. What I have described was left aside by Vrindavan Das Thakur, but although he could not describe these pastimes, he gave us a synopsis. Chaitanya Mangale Tenho Likiyache Stane Stane Se Vachana Shuna Se Padama Pramane. In his book named Chaitanya Mangala, Chaitanya Bhagavat, he has described these pastimes in many places. I request my readers to hear that book, for that is the best evidence. Sangshepe Kahilun Vishtara Nayayaka Tane Vishtarya Veda Vyasa Kariba Varnane. I have described the pastimes very briefly, for it is impossible for me to describe them in full. In the future, however, Vyasadeva or Veda Vyas will describe them more elaborately. Chaitanya Mangale Iha Likiyache Stane Stane Sacha Kahena Vyasa Kariba Varnane. In the Chaitanya Mangal, that's the Chaitanya Bhagavat actually, Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur has stated in many places the factual truth that in the future Vyasadeva will describe the Lord's pastimes elaborately. The statement Age Vyasa Kariba Varnane is similar to the text in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Adi Kanda 180, in which Vrindavan Das Thakur says, Sheshakande Chaitanyara Ananda Vilasa Vistariya Varniteya Chena Veda Vyasa. The unlimited pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will be described by Vyasadeva in the future. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that these statements indicate that in the future other representatives of Vyasadeva will elaborately describe Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. The purport is that any pure devotee in the disciplic succession who describes the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is confirmed to be a representative of Vyasadeva. Chaitanya Lilamrita Sindhu Dughalvi Samana Krishnanu Rupachari Variteno Kaila Pana. The ocean of nectarian pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is like the ocean of milk. According to his thirst, Vrindavan Das Thakur filled his pitcher and drank from that ocean. Tanra Jare Shishamrta Kichu More Dila Tateke Barila Peta Trishnamora Gela. Whatever remnants of milk Vrindavan Das Thakur has given me are sufficient to fill my belly. Now my thirst is completely satiated. Ami Atikshudra Jiva Pakshiranga Tuni Se Yache Trishnaya Pie Samudrera Pani Taiche Ami Ekakana Chunilun Lilara Edrishtante Janiha Prabhura Lilara Vishtara. I am a very insignificant living being, like a small red-beaked bird. Just as the bird drinks the water of the sea to quench its thirst, so I have touched only a drop of the ocean of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. From this example, you may all understand how expansive are the pastimes of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. In other words, amazing things happen every day, and only a few things have been described by both Vrindavandas Thakur and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Amiliki heha mityakare anumana amara sharira kashta putale samandha. I infer that I have written is a false understanding, for my body is like a wooden doll. Vridajara turami annabadhira shtakale manobudhi nahimora stira. I am old and troubled by invalidity. I am almost blind and deaf. My hands tremble, my mind and intelligence are unsteady. In other words, in such a condition, like 90 years old, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami was able to write this most amazing poetry. Not just a narrative, but it's a poetry. You notice that things rhyme. I mean, his mind is, and he didn't have a computer. He was writing by hand, and not only writing by hand, he didn't have a ballpoint pen either. Probably had like a feather or something like that with a sharp point where he had to dip into some ink. I mean, that's how they wrote in those days. No typewriter. Just imagine that. Everything by hand, and you see these Bengali characters. So he actually shaped these Bengali characters. I mean, what a work when you're 90 years old. I mean, amazing. I mean, I'm 73, and to think of doing it in English and poetry, any sort of writing, it becomes a challenge. Nanaroga rasta chalide vasidena pare pancharoga pida vyakula ratridene mare. I'm infected with so many diseases that I can neither properly walk nor properly sit. Indeed, I'm always exhausted by 5 kinds of diseases. I may die at any time of the day or night. Wow. I mean, this means completely on the spiritual platform. I mean, we have computers, we have so much facility, recorders, computers. Remember, this is no electricity. Dependent on natural light. And remember that he was almost blind. So he's dependent on natural light. He didn't have a secretary who noted it down. He personally wrote it. It's unbelievable. And it didn't need any editing. I mean, it's just like perfect from beginning to end. It's amazing. And we are complaining about our situation. Purve grante hiha kariyachi nivedana tatapi like shuna ihara karana. I have previously given an account of my inabilities. Please hear the reason why I nevertheless still write. Shri Govinda, Shri Caitanya, Shri Nityananda, Shri Advaita, Shri Bhaktara, Shri Shrotra Brinda, Shri Surupa, Shri Rupa, Shri Sanatana, Shri Raghunath Dasa, Shri Guru, Shri Jiva Charana, in Hansavara Charana Kripaya, Likaya Mare, Araeka Hayateno, Ati Kripa Kare. I'm writing this book by the mercy of the lotus feet of Sri Govinda Dev, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Nityananda, Dvaitacharya, and other devotees, and the readers of this book, as well as Swarup Damodar Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, who is my spiritual master, and Sri Jiva Goswami. I have also been specifically favored by another Supreme Personality. Shri Madana Gopal More Nikaya Gya Kari Kahite Na Yuyaya Tabu Rahite Na Pari. Shri Madana Mohana deity of Vrindavan is given the order that is making me write. Although this should not be disclosed, I shall disclose it because I am unable to remain silent. Wow. Nakaile Hayamuhura Krita Gnata Dosha Dambakari Vali Shrota Nakari Ha Rusha. If I did not disclose this fact, I would be guilty of ingratitude to the Lord. Therefore, my dear readers, please do not consider me too proud and be angry with me. Toma sabara charanaduli charinu vandana tati Caitanya Lila haila ye kichuli kana. It is because I have offered my prayers unto the lotus feet of all of you that whatever I have written about Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu has been possible. Ebi Anjalila Ganera Kari Anuvada Kaili Pai Lila Shvadara. So now let me repeat all the pastimes of the Anjalila, for if I do so, I shall taste the pastimes again. Pratama Parichede Rupera Dvitiya Milana Taramaje Dvina Takera Vidana Shravana. The first chapter describes how Rupa Goswami met Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu for the second time and how the Lord heard his two dramas, Bidanta Madhava and Lalita Madhava. So he's giving us synopsis. Taramaje Shivananda Sange Kukura Gaila Prabhuratare Krishna Kahana Mukta Karila. That chapter also describes the incident of Shivananda Sen's dog, who was induced by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu to chant the holy name of Krishna and was thus liberated. That's an amazing pastime. Because even if you're a dog of a Vaishnava, you get Krishna consciousness. Dvitiya Chota Haridas Raila Shikshana Taramaje Shivanantera Ascharya Darshana. The second chapter tells how the Lord instructively punished Junior Haridas. Also in that chapter is a description of the wonderful vision of Shivananda Sen. Tritiya Haridasera Mahima Prachanda Tamadara Panditakaila Prabhudeva Danda. And the third chapter is a description of the forceful glories of Haridas Thakur. That chapter also mentions how Damodar Pandit spoke words of criticism to Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Lord Chaitanya had to send him to not weep. Prabhu Namadiya Kaela Brahmananda Mochana Harirasa Kadila Namera Mahima Stapana. The third chapter also tells how Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu delivered everyone by bestowing upon the universe the holy name of the Lord, and it describes how Haridas Thakur established the glories of the holy name by his practical example. Chaturte Shri Sanatanera Dvitiya Milana Teha Tyaga Hoiti Tanra Karila Rakshana. The fourth chapter describes Sanatana Goswami's second visit with Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and how the Lord saved him from committing suicide. He tested him. He had those running sores on his body. Jaishta Masera Dupe Tanre Kaila Parikshana Shakti Sancharya Puna Pathaila Vrindavana. The fourth chapter also tells how Sanatana Goswami was tested in the hot sunshine of Jaishta, May, June, and was then empowered and sent back to Vrindavana. Panchame Pradyuna Mishre Prabhu Kripa Karila Raya Dwara Krishna Kata Tanre Shunaila. The fifth chapter tells how the Lord showed his favor to Pradyumna Mishra and made him hear topics of Krishna from Ramananda Roy. And that's a story when Ramananda Roy was teaching the Devadasis how to dance. Taramaje Bangala Kavira Nataka Pekshana Surupa Goshani Kaila Vigrahera Mahima Stapana. That chapter also describes how Sarup Damodar Goswami rejected the drama of a poet from Bengal and established the glories of the deity. Shaste Raghunatha Dasa Prabhure Milila Nityananda Agnaya Chita Mahotsava Kaila. The sixth chapter describes how Raghunath Das Goswami met Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and performed the Chip Rice Festival in accordance with Nityananda Prabhu's order. That was in Panihati. Amadara Swarupatani Tanra Samarpila Govardhana Shila Gunjamala Tanre Tila. That chapter also tells how the Lord entrusted Raghunath Das Goswami to the care of Sarup Damodar Goswami and gave Raghunath Das the gift of a stone from Govardhan Hill and a garland of small conch shells. It's Gunjamala, actually it's little berries. Saptama Parichede Balabha Batera Milana Nanamate Kaila Tanra. Garva Kandana. The seventh chapter tells how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met Balabhavata and dismantled his false pride in various ways. Balabhavata had presented to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu his commentary, wanted to present his commentary on the Bhagavatam, in which he criticized Sridhar Swami, and Lord Chaitanya rejected him, and eventually Balabhavata became humble and surrendered to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and took initiation from Gadadhar Pandit Goswami. Ashtame Ramachandra Purira Agamana Tanrabaya Kaila Prabhu Diksha Sankochana. The eighth chapter describes the arrival of Ramachandra Puri, that's Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, the godbrother. The godbrother of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's guru, and how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu minimized his eating due to fear of him. So Ramachandra Puri was always criticizing people for eating too much, and even criticized his own guru, Madhavendra Puri, when Madhavendra Puri was leaving this world. Navame Gopinatha Patangayaka Mochana Tri Jagatera Loka Prabhura Paila Darashana. In the ninth chapter is a description of how Gopinath Patanyayaka was delivered and how the people of the three worlds were able to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Dashame Kahilun Bhaktadata Ashvadana Raghava Panditera Kahanjalira Sajana. In the 10th chapter, I've described how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tasted the food given by his devotees, and I've also described the assortment of the bags of Raghava Pandit. That's prasadam too. And Lord Chaitanya ate it all one day, basically. He tasted at least everything on one day. Taramaje Govindera Kaila Parikshana Taramaje Parimunda Richera Varnana. Also in that chapter, is a description of how the Lord examined Govinda and how he danced in the temple. Govinda was his servant, of course. Egadashe Harirastakura Niryana Bhakta Vatsalya Yande Haila Gora Bhagavan. The 11th chapter describes the disappearance of Haridas Thakur and how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, showed his affection for his devotees. He danced with the body of Haridas Thakur. Dwadashe Jagara Nandera Kaila Banjana Nityananda Kaila Shivanandere Tadana. In the 12th chapter are descriptions of how Jagannatha Pandit broke a pot of oil and how Nityananda chastised Shivananda saying. So this when Jagannatha Pandit was very angry because Lord Chaitanya would not accept the sandalwood oil, and he broke it, and he went into locked himself in for about 2 or 3 days until Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him to cook for him. And Lord Nityananda chastised Shivananda saying and kicked him, but Shivananda saying accepted as the Lord's mercy. There's a lot of detail in that particular chapter. So anyway, so we'll continue tomorrow. We did text 53. Where's my pen? Anyway, I don't remember. So we did text 53 to text 120 today. Okay? So now we'll probably finish tomorrow the Caitanya Caritamrta. Wow. It's amazing. Hundreds of days we've spent on the Caitanya Caritamrta. So now we'll allow you all to unmute yourselves. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Raise your hand. Oh, Rishikesh.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. Earlier in the class, I heard.
I can't hear you. That's probably my fault. Wait a second. Let me. Hold on a second. Audio settings. Oh, yeah, the speaker is off. Somehow or other, everything got set real low. Okay, start your question again.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine now.
Okay. I just was wondering, Gurudev, earlier I heard saying that Radharani is so, she looks for Krishna's satisfaction, right? Whatever it takes to
Yes.
even. So, but sometimes there's a man also, Radharani basically gets
Yes,
upset when he meets Chandravali or
or
something.
angry. Yeah,
Yeah,
her
angry.
anger.
So how do you compare these two mood?
Well, her man is actually, she does that because that gives Krishna pleasure. That was mentioned in the previous verse we read today. That she give once she sees that that's what Krishna wants, then she gives it up really easily. It's not like selfish man or envious man that people have in this world. Sometimes we hear about the envy between the different gopis, but that manifestation of envy is done with the idea of giving Krishna pleasure.
Okay.
Krishna wants to see her angry. Just like Krishna one time was teasing Satyabhama, his wife. You remember this from the Krishna book. He
Right.
was teasing her, saying that you actually married the wrong person. You still have an opportunity. You still look pretty young, even though she was grandmother, maybe great grandmother at that time. Uh, you married me. And Krishna wanted to make her angry because he enjoys this. And instead, she fainted, and Krishna had to manifest two extra arms to catch her. So, Krishna, he loves that anger. And he also loves when Radharani or his beloved expansions of Radharani give up that anger. So that's why they give up the anger very, very easily. Uh, sometimes in this material world, when we have some anger, we get angry with someone, we don't give it up so easily. We just, I've seen that sometimes anger goes on for one's whole lifetime. There's especially with these men women thing. If the man does something the woman doesn't like, then he'll get reminded of it. Like
Even after death.
isn't it true?
Even after death, Gurudev.
Even after death, even at his funeral, she'll be speaking about
Yeah.
it because that is actually material anger. But spiritual anger is she plays at that to give Krishna pleasure. And then as soon as she sees Krishna is happy, then she gives up that anger. That was one of the first verses we read today. That to please Krishna, she gives up the anger like that. So, good question.
So in my just one last question, Gurudev. In my stage, what really gives pleasure to Krishna? In my
What do you
if I
what?
have to give pleasure to Krishna, what should I do?
Serve Prabhupada's mission.
Okay.
Then you're sure. Don't get angry with Krishna. That's not going to give pleasure to Krishna. All right. Good question. Thank you, Rishikesh. So now we have Madhava. You can unmute yourself. You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dandavat Pranam Gurudev. So I just had a small comment when you're describing what Rishikesh Prabhu, he was asking the question even when some in my school days I read poetry of some so-called materialistic poet when he's really describing some ras, and then they also even materialistic poets, they described actually if the beloved gets angry, actually it gives tremendous joy to the lover. Yeah,
Yes.
even these guys describe, and but very interesting thing, what you in the end you are discussed the Rishikesh said that even after death, that anger is never gone. Actually, that is the difference when these materialistic poets never describe, never talk about that, because that is not there anyway. So that is how very, very interesting. Dandavat, Gurudev.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
So in the material world,
Yes,
we just like keep our anger for years and years and years,
yes.
and that's not spiritual. Actually, Prabhupada said the quality of a Vaishnava, actually not only Prabhupada, but Krishna says the quality of a Vaishnava is to forgive. It's one of the qualities of a Brahmin too. It's forgiveness. Uh, and even in the Christian Bible, like Jesus says, if someone hits you on one cheek, you turn the other cheek. In other words, it's not that you allow yourself to be beaten like that, but you forgive. And the Haridas Thakuri, I mean, you see all these different stories of devotees being abused. I mean, there was, one story in Lord Ramanujacharya's pastimes about his chief disciple Quraysh, whose eyes were put out by the king because Quraysh, to protect Ramanujacharya, had dressed up like Ramanujacharya, and Quraysh had insisted that Vishnu was the supreme personality of Godhead, not Lord Shiva. So his eyes were put out, and then Lord Chaitanya, not Lord Chaitanya, then Ramanujacharya said, "Go to the deities and ask for your eyes back." So Quraysh, instead of going to the deities and asking for his eyes back, went to the deities and asked that this king, whose name later on was Creamy Kanta, means worm throat. But anyway, he asked that the king would be forgiven. And that's amazing. And then Ramanujacharya told Quraysh, "Go back and ask for your eyes back." And he did that, and then he got his eyes back, and his sight was restored, which is really, really a Vaishnava quality. So Vaishnava is just thinking of the pleasure of Krishna, and it doesn't give Krishna pleasure that we have, bitterness or anger towards people. Sometimes anger may be necessary, like if we're dealing with the Mayavadi or something, or a personalist, we may get angry. Just like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was angry with Balabhabata because Balabhabata was criticizing Sridhar Swami, the original commentator on the Srimad Bhagavatam. But then Lord Chaitanya gave that up when Balabhabata's consciousness changed. He didn't hold on to his anger. People just hold on to anger. So I think that's a really important point. So Radharani's anger was to give Krishna's pleasure. It wasn't just like from her heart, tearing someone apart, anger. So, thank you. So just one other question in the chat window. Can we feel a minute level of Vipralambha Bhav in our daily relationship? Yes. Not in the same level as Lord Chaitanya, but, separation from Krishna, as far as feeling the love the gopis feel due to separation, that's pretty elevated. Pretty elevated. I mean, it's gonna. You better wait. You better wait, because everything is really mixed right now. But at least separation from Krishna or from Krishna's devotee, like Ramananda Roy says, the most intense pain is to be separated from the devotees of Krishna. And it is. I mean, who would want to be separated from the devotees of Krishna? So, that's a little hint, but it's not like the gopis feeling their separation, because Yugayitam nimishena chakshusha pravashayitam shunyayitam jagat sarvam govinda viraheman. Feeling a moment like a yuga cycle. I mean, how can you understand that? Even the blinking of the eyes, they get upset with the blinking of the eyes. How can we possibly, in our conditioned state, understand that sort of intense mood? Like a moment is like, millions of years. Divya Yuga. Like millions of years. I can't understand that. I mean, if I forget Krishna for a moment or an hour, it's not like millions of years. It's just like an hour. Or whatever period of time. So, anyway, thank you very much for that question. And we will see everybody, hopefully, if the world is still here, tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow evening. Thank you very much. All glories to His Divine Grace.